Introduction.
All right, good evening, guys. We are here. We are in Keaton Beach. It is September 1st. We are actually on time this month, Kenny, for as far as doing the fishing report at the beginning of the month. So that's always good. We're off to a good start here in September. This month, this is the Big Bend Fishing Report. I am Captain Jay Carson. This is Captain Kenny Mullins here next to me on my left. And then down there at the end, we've got the legendary Pat McGriff of One More Cast Guide Service joining us tonight. Pat, we definitely appreciate. And we got the OG Evan Snow over here in house tonight too. So Evan, thanks for swinging by and supporting us there, my man. This show, the September show, is brought to you by Keaton Beach Vacation Rentals right here in Keaton Beach. Talk a little bit about the Keaton Beach Vacation Rentals. First of all, you can find them online at www.keatonbeachrentals.com. They've got a bunch of houses down here. I'm just going to run through some of the options as far as rentals go. They are the premier rental company here in Keaton Beach, Florida. So if this is a location that you're interested in checking out and you want to come down and stay for a few days, Stephanie at Keaton Beach Vacation Rentals is who you want to get in touch with. So just real quick, I'm going to run through some of the houses. They've got several houses: the Boathouse, Fish Gills, Margaritaville, Little Orehouse, and the SS Keaton. All of these sleep at least 3 people. And then they've got efficiency sleeps. They've got ice machines. Most of them have wet slips, fish cleaning stations. And then they've also got a store right here in Keaton Beach in which you can rent kayak rentals and bicycle rentals as well. We are sitting right here. We are in one of the rentals at Fish Gills, right here just off the main canal in Keaton Beach. You can see a beautiful view there behind us. You can look over here to our left, and we're watching the sunset go down right over here, so that's kind of cool. All right, so like I said, this month is brought to you by Keaton Beach Vacation Rentals, and we appreciate them having us and hosting us. Kenny, what's up, dude?
Not much.
Yeah.
What's up? How's the fishing been?
It's been, for September, pretty good. I mean, for August. I mean, actually, I thought that August is usually kind of a slower month.
It's been turning on.
And it's not been terrible. It's not been terrible. It's been, we've had some really good days out there, so we can talk a little bit more about that. As far as water temp goes here lately, it's been hovering in the mid to high 80s for the most part. Also, I mean, we're in the traditional, we're still kind of summer patterns, right? I mean, We're getting rain just about every day. The one thing that's been nice, which may or may not be beneficial for trout fishing, depending on who you talk to, is the wind has been down. So that's kind of it. You haven't had to deal with a lot of wind here lately. And Pat, I know you like a little wind when you're trout fishing, right?
I like a lot of wind.
Yeah,
I like a lot of wind.
Yeah. Even when you're throwing plugs in top water, you like that wind up there?
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of been the conditions here lately. We're still in that summer pattern, and I guess, we should be looking for that first front to kind of roll in here sometime in September.
Yeah, the mornings have been fairly cool. It's been nice.
Yeah, it has been nice. We've gotten, I think, we got low 70s. We still haven't touched that. That first morning that touches in the 60s is kind of when it's about to go down. So that's kind of our forecast. The other thing that I've been noticing, too, that has not been terrible for this time of year is the floating grass has been manageable.
Yes.
Would you agree?
It's been manageable.
Yeah. There's definitely some spots out there where you can get and find some clean water to throw, plugs in, and spoons and things like that, which has been, can be tough to throw this time of year. Why don't we just give a quick report as far as what do you want to start with? What do you feel like starting with?
What's water temps been?
They've been, like I said, mid to high 80s.
Yep.
Low
80s in some mornings.
Yeah.
Reaching up. Mid.
Yep. Actually, the other day when I got in and I was like, man, it's not really cool water for August.
Yeah.
So I think
the other day we got on the water pretty early and it was 81.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been, and then if you get a couple days in a row we've been getting that rain every afternoon, so that's been keeping the water temps down. But when you get a couple days in a row, that water temp, if you get a couple days with no rain, that water temp will climb back up there.
Right.
But I think because of the rain, it's keeping the water temps down, and it's making the fishing really good.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's start. What do you, let's see, as far as, let's start with trout, I guess. You want to start with sea trout?
Yeah, actually, trout's been picking up a little bit. been catching more kind of in a little bit. My last trip, we caught most of them in about 3.5 to 4.5 feet of water.
Yeah, I caught a trout in about 1.5 foot of water the other day.
Yeah, we caught a big one last week. Very big one.
Yeah, I was in there really shallow.
We were in about 1.5 foot.
Yeah, I was in there really shallow looking for redfish, and I saw something pop, chase some bait right there, and I was like, well, that might be probably a red right there, and I threw over there. It was a nice, 20-inch trout, so I wasn't expecting them. Usually, they're not that shallow this time of year, but there's a few in there. There's a lot of bait around, too.
Yeah, a lot of bait. That's what I was going to say. I'm seeing a lot of shrimp is pushed in, which I believe that's what has them trout pushed in.
Yeah. Pat, you typically, so for September, or that transition from August to September, how are you typically, not necessarily where as far as location, but maybe water depth and clarity are you looking for fish at?
Well, I'm still looking for some stain. I'd rather have stained water than clear water any
Sure.
day. I don't spot my fish like you two do. I don't do it quite as skinny as y'all run. My Parker's not set up for that.
Right.
So, I need I prefer stained water because the fish seem to be more active, especially the larger fish. The smaller trout, they don't know any different, but the larger fish that can't really ambush without some cover of the color of the water.
Right.
Like today with that out there slick, if you didn't have some stained water, you're going to have a hard day.
Right. Yeah.
With all this rain, we've got some good stain.
Yeah, there's some stain, definitely in our areas where you're getting around more of where those creeks and you get that more of that water flow coming out in the Gulf. You got a lot more stained water there. It's stained but clear.
Right.
It's stained but clear. Because I was out in some areas that I fished this time of year well, actually, I don't normally fish this time of year, and I was over there just checking some things out, and I was surprised, one, at how clear the water was, and two, at how many fish were around in an area that I wasn't expecting to see a lot of fish in.
Yeah, probably same areas where I've been,
right.
Same terrain, I guess.
So with that being said, I think that's why the fishing's been good so far, especially for typically, your August and September pattern, you're staying deeper because the water warm, the bait's out there,
and there's still some.
And there's still some deeper for sure, but it seems like for whatever reason, this has been a good year as far as fishing close. There's still a lot of fishing close, and when I say in close, I mean kind of within. I don't know, what would you say, like half a mile of the grass line?
It's about accurate.
Yeah. As opposed to having to be 2-3 miles out and 6 to 12.
You fishing out of Keaton or you fishing out of
both?
Econfina?
Both.
You find any difference between the two?
A lot. So I'm fine when I'm fishing up, in some of the northern areas from like Econfina, and also a lot of smaller fish up in close. The bigger fish seem to be hanging off out a little bit. I would say that would be the only, and then down here out of Keaton, there's a lot of bigger. The size fish quality out of Keaton Beach is a lot better right now, as far as redfish is concerned.
Redfish, yes.
I'm talking redfish in that one.
Yeah. Trout around has been deeper here.
Yeah. And I haven't been doing much trout fishing here lately. So have you? I mean, I know you've been fishing some of the north stuff, and then out of Keaton.
Yeah,
have you
I
seen
fished
pretty
both.
similar pattern between the two areas?
Night and day difference.
Yeah.
As far as trout.
Yeah. So I mean, you care to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Even redfish. I mean, like you said, then closer around here, and I'm catching them farther out. Further north I go.
Right. And when we say north, we're our range that we typically talk about is, I guess you would say, Steenhatchee to St. Mark's. Right. St. Mark's is kind of the north and west northern area of our region that we kind of cover, and so that's kind of what we're talking about up there. Yeah. So, I mean, as far as the trout goes, I mean, you said it's different.
Trout, the farther north I go, the closer in they are. And I think a lot of it's like he was talking about the stain, and there's a lot of bait fish, and there's a lot of shrimp being pushed in right now.
Yeah.
Are you finding shrimp in their stomachs when you clean them, or are you just seeing shrimp?
Both. Seeing shrimp and finding them in their stomachs.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. In fact, I was coming down the Keaton Beach Canal the other day, and I'm sitting there just idling in, and right there on that little mud flat that's right there was some shrimp flicking up out of the surface right there.
A lot of shrimp.
So there's definitely some shrimp around, and that obviously when there's bait, there's going to be, when there's forage, there's going to be game fish, and that might be the reason. Maybe this year we've got more shrimp in close, and so it's keeping the fish in close a little bit better.
Yeah, last year, you remember, you probably remember I was telling you a spot that you typically fish in other times of year had a lot of shrimp this time.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
It wasn't. There wasn't that much shrimp this far south, but this year it seems to be more spread out.
Yeah, a lot more evenly spread out.
Is your bite better in the morning because of that?
Yes and no. Right now, I'm fishing tide. I fish some mornings and do good them cooler temps.
Yeah.
But tide movement is critical.
Man,
incoming.
Yes.
And just to piggyback off of that, we had a really good day, middle of around lunchtime, just fishing almost a fall pattern. I was fishing like a fall or early spring pattern, and I was having just a lot of good success.
Water movement.
Some. I was just
I've been red fishing.
I was red fishing.
Okay.
Yeah, I was red fishing.
I was talking about trout.
And I was working working a grass bank, which I don't normally work grass banks this time of year,
right.
And I was just working a grass line bank, and man, it was just one right after the other. So, it's been good.
Yeah, typically what I do is I dissect that tide curve.
Yeah.
And the first third, I'll fish typically redfish. The middle third, I like trout fishing. And then the top third, I like going back to redfish.
Yeah. Yep.
You're sneaky.
All right, so I guess we can talk. I mean, so predominantly trout. What has been the bait that's been working? Because, like I said, I've been fishing mostly redfish, so I can't speak to trout too much right now.
Pinfish is always good. Mostly, I've been throwing a lot of topwater. Topwater's been on fire.
Especially for bigger fish.
Yeah, some bigger paddle tails like the
Die
dapper. I've been throwing the watermelon red die dapper on a twist lock hook.
Assassin.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's been hot.
So topwater, pinfish, and then that soft plastic, big soft plastic.
Swim baits.
Yeah. There's a lot of ballyhoo around, and ballyhoo is a primary late summer forage in our area, and that bigger profile bait looks like a ballyhoo.
Yeah, and I've been throwing. Really, I mean, even though I've been fishing some stain, I've been throwing the color that I would typically throw in clearer water because that stain is clear.
Yeah. It is, like you said, it is a clear stain. It's a clear. Yeah. Pat, what do you like for this time of year? I'm sure but if you can't use pinfish, or what do you like? You just.
I'm going to put the 5-inch under a cord.
Yeah.
Because if like you say you're seeing bait, they should be mature now.
Right.
There are some fish that hatch late in the season.
Sure.
But, hopefully most of our bait by September, October are going to be larger. So I'm going to go with a larger profile bait.
Sure.
And that's what Kenny's talking about. Your die dapper is bigger than the 5-inch. It's about a 6.5-inch bait, isn't it?
Yep.
Well, and let me ask you this. So what do you think? Do you think there's anything, especially with big trout, that bigger bait, it's more of a substantial meal for the amount of energy that they have to expend to catch that meal, as opposed during the summer it's hot, fish are trying to they're a little lethargic, and so
no, I don't think that.
Okay.
I don't think that at all. I think the trout's a complete opportunist.
Okay.
And being an ambush predator, you're an opportunist.
Right.
You're by definition.
Sure.
I think the larger bait just is going to be what he's feeding on, what he's imprinted on, and you're matching the hatch, as they say.
Right.
And one thing I'm doing is I'm just straight reeling. Covering a lot of water because this time of year is typically tough, a little slower. So the more water you cover, the more opportunity you're going to have.
And then obviously, if the windier it is, the more water you can cover as well. So, and that. So Pat, if you don't mind me asking, why do you like the wind so much? Is it just about covering water, or do you feel like the fish are more comfortable when you're in the wind, or what is it about the wind that you like?
Oh, it's not me; it's the fish that like it.
Okay,
the preference is there's threefold.
Okay.
One, of course, you're covering more water if you're drift fishing, which I do. I don't pin up. I rarely pin up unless I hit a double on reds, or I suspect a school of reds, or I have encountered schools of reds on a particular spot, like a bar or a point. But the wind does several things. If you're an ambush predator, it's going to give you cover because it's going to chop the surface so it refracts the light. So as it changes the light, regardless of the color of water, I can catch fish, and I I change where I am according to how much wind.
And
this
wind
time of year, and one of my secrets I shouldn't say is I play the drafts of the storms, and I'm not recommending you go out there and get struck by lightning. You have to use your brain and be careful out there. But when we have these late summer, shoreline rainfalls, when it's not on the coast, then you're going to have a draw from that, and you can move up the coast and pick that draw and catch a limit of fish in a short period of time that in an area that you just fished earlier in the day or the same tide. The second reason is being an ambush predator. The water is going to be moving faster, and if you're lucky enough to get the two together, meaning current and the wind direction, this fish is going to have more opportunities, and therefore he will set up. In a stronger current, I believe that the larger trout's instincts are go set up, it's happening.
Right.
Because I have so many fish so quickly. You can go bang, 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 and then it's over. When it's over, it's the breeze.
Right.
It's nothing but the breeze. And so these fish are sitting on go, waiting for the proper or the preferentials, what I should say.
Right.
Cover and blow.
Right.
And then they'll bang, bang, bang. I mean, it happened to me last trip out. We waited all day I was waiting on the tide, and all of a sudden we got a breeze. It just came from nowhere. It was mid-tide, dead middle of the tide, and bang, 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 we caught reds and trout. And the next drift, we didn't get a bait pulled down.
Yeah.
So
and the only difference was the intensity of the wind? Or
yes,
yeah.
It went from nothing to substantial 10, 11 miles, 12 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Sea breeze.
One more thing with your baits, with your artificials, I really can't understand why people don't prefer the wind with artificials. It's just that what they have is a favorite. They have a preferential weather that they fish. So they have picked a set of artificials, be they soft or hard baits, that they fish in slick water.
Yeah.
And they're too stubborn or ignorant or whatever, uninformed, not to change over to the baits that work in the wind.
Right.
And Kenny can tell you the larger bait he's throwing is so that because he knows he's not getting them long to look at it, he better give them a big bait to see.
Right.
You've got to match that if you're going to reel.
Yeah.
If you're going to put a weighted kill bait on there and move it, you better have a big one. You can't be finesse fishing with little bitty baits.
Right.
But back to the artificials, the color, the size, and the rattle, and the noise. One bait over another is going to make a different noise.
Another thing with that didapper, it's got a big tail.
That's right.
Very big tail.
Yeah.
It's moving a lot of water on its own. It's disturbing a lot of water.
Yeah. That's
the other thing is that it kicks up the material in the water. You can have a dead calm day and there can be plenty of stain in the water or debris. And all of a sudden the breeze blows and the color, the clarity of the water changes within 20 minutes of that blow. Mm-hmm. And those fish will key to that. Now it will also shut them down. Mm-hmm. I've had plenty of blowouts where I'm up north of Warrior and then just have to leave and split the difference back to the beach in order to recover my day.
Right. Yeah. That's good stuff. That's definitely some, especially if you like trout or trout's your thing. Trying to plan around that or
I catch more reds in the blow, don't you, Kenny?
I do catch a lot of reds.
I feel like though that redfish are less affected by it. Like I mean, obviously, a redfish I don't feel like is now they will be more spooky. Like when it's slick out, they're a lot more spooky. They're a lot harder to approach. But as far as they're, I would say that they're not nearly as affected by that wind as trout are.
I think they are. I think they stage in my experiences.
Sure.
They stage in a different area.
Okay.
And if you can locate where they want to be out of that wind, I don't think they necessarily like the wind. I think the wind pushes them in certain areas, and you can
pushes bait to them too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Pinned against the bank,
definitely.
I always go straight to the bank in 20 knots for a red.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I want to be 50 feet. I want to be sitting 50 feet.
Right on the bank.
Right on it. Yep,
and that is the fish taking advantage of the preferred
exactly.
condition.
Yep.
His instincts are telling him that. He doesn't think.
Yep.
So, right dead up on the bank.
And you can watch those birds.
Now finish that. You know what the old timers told me? When the white birds are on the point, the fish are feeding, regardless of the weather.
Pushing the bait in there.
And when they're back up in the trees, you can have a sandwich.
Yeah, I use those birds to figure out which flat I want to work as well. So like some flats, when the water drains out, the wading birds will be all on one flat, and they'll might not be on another one. And if you kind of concentrate on that flat that those wading birds are on when the water's low enough, that's a good place to start.
Absolutely, the birds know where the bait is.
The birds know where the bait is. That's exactly right. So speaking of, I guess to kind of finish up with redfish, as far as what we've been catching them on, I guess I'll start there. I've been throwing paddle tails, spoons, and topwater for the most part.
Same here.
So that's pretty much what everything has come on. When I've been sight fishing them, I've been throwing paddle tails at them, spoons some, and then topwater, and then if I'm searching, I'm throwing that spoon, man. If I'm searching for fish, I'm throwing that spoon, or I'm throwing that topwater.
Been catching a lot of trout this week on spoons.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Crazy.
You're using the Mike Hackler's.
Yeah, the aqua dream. Yep, that's it, man. That is.
And what colors do y'all prefer?
The gold or copper is pretty much all I throw.
Copper's my favorite.
I do like. So if I get in some really stained water, I might change it up. The pink in the really stained water, also the white in the really stained water, because that white creates a good contrast for whatever reason, and that seems to.
Yeah, when I run south and snook fish, I'll throw that white a lot.
Yeah, and that white is just looks more like a bait fish, you know. Yeah, I guess maybe if they're keyed in on bait fish or feeding on that forage, then maybe they might want that over there. But as far as redfish are concerned, man, that gold or copper, I don't even know that it matters which one you throw.
Oh yeah,
it may just be me, but I like that copper a little better.
My rule, I used to sell spoons with Bill on the Precision Tackle, the Flats Intruder, and my rule on there is the 3 B's for the black spoon. Y'all ever throw a black spoon?
Yeah, you can. I have never thrown one, but I imagine it would work the same way that kind of a dark colored plug or bait works in stain, low light conditions as well. You creates that silhouette.
No, it's the opposite.
Oh, okay.
All right. You want me to tell you why?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, you know what your iris is.
Yes.
In the iris, how does it retract?
Well, it opens up. It opens up in low light conditions, and it retracts in high light level.
A photoreceptor is a cell that changes the color of the fish, and it works in the opposite. So close your eyes and think about being on the beach at 12 or last year and throw a cast net. Throw a cast net in the surf. Water's turbid. You can't see a foot, and you bring up these little fish, and they're what? White as that notebook paper.
Right.
You put them in the bucket, and you go to throw the net, and you come back and look in the bucket, and all of your white fish have turned dark black. Why? Because the sunlight in the bucket, first the sand settled, and the sunlight penetrated and lit up all their photoreceptors, and they turned dark. A pinfish crossing the sand is going to be dark and black. So you throw a black spoon on the days when you're bone fishing in Belize. And when would you be bone fishing? What would you be throwing? What kind of tackle would you be using?
Oh, I'm fly fishing if I'm bone fishing in Belize. Yeah.
And that means it's dead slick calm, right?
Yeah.
It's sweating.
Well,
okay, if it's dead slick calm, then if you're in Belize, you're in the Mediterranean water, so the water's clear.
It's super clear down there.
Okay.
Yes.
Now here's the rule on copper: 3 C's. When it's clear and calm, throw copper. That's all you got to remember.
All right, there you go.
I don't know from pink and white and all
that.
That
makes sense because you catch a redfish. If you ever fish a tournament, you put a redfish in live well and it's dark, they turn live.
Yeah, they change colors, for sure. It's by their surroundings. It's just like when you catch a fish in that. If you catch a sea trout in that stained water, further north, it's going to have that really cool yellow around the mouth and yellow tones to the underbelly. Whereas if you catch them out of Keaton, they're a lot more silver, and the spots are darker. There's more contrast between the body and the spots.
They're getting more light.
Yeah, they're getting more light. Exactly.
They call largemouth bass black bass in Florida. They don't
ditch pickles.
They don't call them black bass in Georgia.
No. All right, so. Yeah, I guess that's going to wrap us up on redfish as far as that's concerned. Anything else we missed? I think we got it covered, right?
Yeah, we got it covered.
All right. So that brings us. That was a long first segment. Long first segment. That's going to bring us to segment number 2, which is our best bets, sponsored by Keaton Beach Bums, which is on 2051 Beach Road, Perry, Florida. Down here at Keaton Beach. Keaton Beach has all of your go-to needs for a day on the water. Everything from ice, bait, tackle, gas, food, whatever you think of. They whatever you need, they've got it in there. I think they've even got like bathing suits in there and sunglasses. And
if they don't have it, ask them. They'll get it.
They'll for sure. And I know we say this every time, but the food in there is really good. So if you get a chance, stop in there for all of your on the water needs. I'm in there every time I'm down here. I'm in Keaton Beach Bum. So
normally their gas prices are cheaper too.
Yeah, so their prices are when I come down to get they have non-ethanol fuel, and so it's just as cheap down here as it is anywhere. So I always wait to get my boat fuel when I get down here. So all right, best bets. So Pat, as far as September goes, based on your years of experience, what would be your September best bet as far as tactic and then species that you would target with it?
Well, I'm going to concentrate with artificials in the mornings because as the water cools, as Kenny said, the shrimp have started to come in. Now, these fish are still nocturnal, even though they've got some shrimp to eat in the daytime. They're not used to that, and so their natural reaction is to continue feeding on those shrimp that are available under low light, and then boom, all of a sudden it'll just snap off at about 9:30 somewhere in that area.
Absolutely.
And so your plastics, I'm going to concentrate and try to get the guys that can do it to throw plastics early, and then we'll swap over to live bait as necessary.
Yeah, that's good. Kenny?
So I pretty much told you what I'm using right now. As we get later in the month, I do a lot of transitioning. Typically September, other than last year, last year was phenomenal here. I'd never left the area. But typically I'll run south of here and get on some good redfish and be throwing blue crabs and shrimp. And
okay.
Last year was different. This year we got a lot of reds here.
We do.
Trout's moving in. Yeah. So, I'm going to stick with a lot of artificial, like probably bigger soft plastic most of the time.
Okay.
Depending on the clients I have, that's something else with guiding that a lot of people doesn't realize. We have to cater to the fishermen and their abilities.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt.
So, they're starting to get shrimp, and there's a lot of shrimp in, so shrimp would not be a bad option. Just buy a bunch because bait fish are going to eat them.
Yeah, there's still a lot of pinfish out there on the flats for sure. And then so if you're using shrimp, you're going to, go through a lot of shrimp, weeding, getting through the bait fish and whatever else is going to.
If you are going to use them, put it on a cork, keep popping it, keep it moving.
Keep it moving.
Yep, keep it moving.
So I guess that would be a good tactic to keep if you are using shrimp, to keep that, shrimp on your hook for as long as possible without it, getting.
Do what?
So he's talking about using shrimp when there's a lot of pinfish on the flats, right?
Yeah, you're going to buy 300 instead of 100.
Yeah, and another thing is just what I was saying is keep the cork moving. Keep popping it a little more. It's going to pull it away from those bait fish a little more, and it's going to last a little bit longer.
Okay. I don't do that, but I've got my own tactic.
As far as keeping the pinfish off your shrimp?
Yes.
Yeah, he doesn't use them.
No, if I'm using shrimp, then we're going to pop and we're going to extend the period before we move it again. So we're not giving, I call it don't be the popsicle man.
Yeah. You don't have the ice cream truck sound running around. Yeah.
Here comes the popsicle man. So pop it, the more often that you pop it, the more pinfish chase it down. But if you get a dip from the pinfish, what I do is I call it a sweep. I pick the rod tip up from pointed directly at him with the line tight and pull it up and back past my ear. What that does is give the trout that are watching the game of the pinfish pecking at it time to get over there and get under it. They go out to the pinfish pinfish go back down, and boom, they take the bait. It's a slow reaction time to the nibbling of the.
Well, and two, I'm when I am, trout fishing a little bit, it does seem like a lot of your trout strikes come after a pinfish has nibbled on it, a little bit. And I guess that's what you're talking about.
He's their locator. It's a mirror ball.
Yeah. Right. And when I say popping, I'm not saying, just nonstop. I'm just saying a little more than I would if I had a pinfish on, probably about half the time.
Now, I'll do that in the cool weather because the pinfish are lethargic and won't run you down.
Mm-hmm.
but at 88 to 90 degrees, they're at their height.
Yeah,
Right.
they're-
That's why I said later in the month as things start.
I wasn't really trying to correct you. I was just
Right.
saying, I do it different. I do that particular thing different.
It also depends on species. You know, redfish, you pop it a bunch, they're coming.
You can't outrun him.
no. And when they come in, they'll eat your cork. They'll eat.
Can I ask both of y'all a question? Can I ask both
Go
of y'all
ahead.
a question?
Go ahead.
Why don't either of you throw the jig spinners?
Oh, I do.
I do.
Oh,
Sometimes.
definitely.
But you never mention them.
I throw them when this time of year I'm not really throwing them that much. I tend to throw those when the weather's a little bit cooler and I'm still trying to cover water because you know that when you're retrieving that bait it swims slower than a spoon does. I feel like you can slow it down because it's got a bigger blade on it, more of like a Colorado blade on it, and then I'll just kind of slowly bump that across the bottom.
And see, we tried one this week. We were throwing the Red Daddy, and where I was fishing at, the type of grass that was there, that exposed hook, just we couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. Okay.
Well, and then too, like, so why I don't throw that when they're eating that spoon, they eat that spoon 2-to-1 over anything else for whatever reason. It seems like when they want that spoon, and it's the same presentation for the most part, and I'm catching 2-to-1 over, and I've tried it. I've tried throwing when they're really in there when I'm covering water. It seems like, man, that spoon works 2-to-1 over those spinnerbait type baits.
All right. Just curious.
But to your point, when that water does cool down and gets cool, and I'm trying to cover water to locate fish, I'll break that out, just because I can swim it slower.
Yeah, back in the spring, I was throwing the crap.
Thunderspin.
No, the chatterbaits quite a bit.
Yeah, the chatterbaits are good. It's a very similar. And it's kind of similar action to the spinnerbait. It's just got more vibration.
Yep.
Not as much flash, more vibration. Would be my description of the difference between those two baits. Yeah.
Well, your customer, I know why you were throwing it, Kenny, because they could feel what was going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It does vibrate, man. You can feel that when you're throwing that chatterbait. It's like
I personally don't like
it's
it because
chattering.
of that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
I don't
chattering.
like the feel in the rod.
The
It's just
vibration.
a
Yeah.
personal thing.
And you do
They
need,
work.
like, if you throw a chatterbait, you need a medium heavy action rod to throw that bait, just because of the heaviness of it,
drag.
and the drag that you're dragging that water through that resistance and the. But that's a good bait. I've caught a lot of redfish on a chatterbait. A lot of redfish on a chatterbait.
Yeah, for
so.
sure. And they'll run shallow.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's our tackle tip for the
Best bets.
Best bets for the month of September. Again, sponsored by Keaton Beach Bums, right down here in Keaton Beach, Florida. We appreciate them being a monthly sponsor. And like I said, if you need anything for a day on the water, they got it in there. So make sure you stop in there and say hi to Jared and Monica, and they'll get you hooked up in there. All right, tackle tip. So we're going to do the tackle tip kind of together. So I had a good question from somebody on Facebook that asked, what would be, if I was new to saltwater fishing in our area, what would be a good starter pack as far as, a couple of baits that somebody is just wanting to kind of get into it. So I figured we could maybe talk a little bit about that in this month's tackle tip. So Pat, if you had to, tell somebody they were coming down here, maybe they were bank fishing or they had a kayak and they could, launch somewhere and they were wanting to get into, catching redfish and trout, what would you say would be the maybe 3 to 5 baits to to get them started?
This is my least favorite question. Without knowing the skill set of the
Sure,
angler,
sure.
this is
Well,
okay,
go ahead.
That's very difficult.
Yeah,
Beginner.
Yeah,
If they're a beginner, the cork and grub combo. Obviously, I work with Cajun Thunder, so I would
Sure.
say a oval Cajun Thunder and a 1/8 or 1/16 ounce screw lock jig. Now, the reason for the screw lock or the spin on or screw on is they're going to use less plastic, and they're not, or gulp or whatever. And I probably, I would not give them gulp because they would become professional 12 to 14 inch trout catchers. So gulp, I would definitely not recommend gulp. I use scent. I use Bang on my plastic, but I use a shrimp flavored Bang because it draws more pinfish behind it, and as they trail it, it brings more trout in, as we've discussed what happens. But the cork and grub combo is pretty much foolproof in that it keeps you off the bottom, so you're not frustrated in with the timing problem of bouncing or working an artificial jig,
Sure.
a bait that sinks. That's probably mine. And I'll shut up and let y'all go. I mean, I'd use Assassin Sea Shed. I'd put a paddle tail under it for more activity. But if they they need the 5-inch or the jerk shed and whose ever brand, be it Assassin or whoever's, because you're gonna become frustrated with the tails being bit off. So if you use the larger non-swimming tail baits or non, what we just call it, the paddle tail. I don't ever use the word paddle tail. That's just something I don't say. But anyway, the paddles are frustrating. So the non-paddle tail baits, regardless of brand, in
Fluke
the plastics.
jerk sheds.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the Z-Mans in that. I'll let Kenny pick a color for you.
Yeah.
Watermelon slide.
We'll see. All right, what's your color, Jay? And then I'll pick one.
My favorite color is soft plastic. Gosh.
You can't have but one now. This
Oh,
is
just
really-
one?
you can't have
Yeah.
but one.
I would say
one-
pearl.
One, I'd have to say
Pearl.
white.
They're
light
going pearl. I'm going pink. I'll beat them with pink.
Yeah.
I'll go with pink.
That's
Yeah.
a-
Pink.
That's
That,
a stain.
that's my second one though. Like
That's
so,
too-
it's
that's a
between pearl
shame.
and pink, man. It's
You
like
had a choice to
yeah,
say
I
pink
know,
and
I
you
know,
didn't.
I know.
Hey, that's that stain. He likes that
Yeah,
stain.
that's he's not in stain water. That's right. No, but that you're right. I mean, that pearl and that pink. I mean, that seems to be.
I got to agree with Evan there.
Yeah. Evan Snow says Cajun Thunder and gulp equals a Guggen rig.
Well, I mean, they are beginners.
That's what we're talking about here, Evan. We're talking about somebody who's new to saltwater fishing. They may not necessarily be a Guggen, but somebody that's new.
Evan said electric chicken.
Electric chicken is a great one.
Anything else? So you would just say master that cork and that soft plastic, and then go from there.
He asked for 3. Y'all got to do one.
Oh, okay.
That's
All right.
mine.
Oh, okay. So that's yours. All right. So Kenny, what would be yours?
So, probably a fluke style bait, rigged weedless with a keel weighted. Fluke, the sea shad.
Give them some brand to pick. Give them something.
I use saltwater assassin,
Okay.
bass
And
assassin.
who's hook? Who's keel weight?
I use owner twist locks.
Okay.
Yeah. Evan, that's where I'm going.
And what weight?
Yeah, that's
What weight?
I knew you were going to go
Yeah,
there, so that's why I didn't.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I typically, for all around, I'd say 1/8
As far as jig head to go with that soft plastic.
twist lock.
Oh yeah, twist lock. One
because
yep.
if it's a new fisherman, that way they're not getting hung up as much
On the bottom, yeah,
Right.
because you can fish that 1/8 ounce pretty much
Yeah.
in any depth and
everything's
get away with it. Yep.
Everything's gonna eat a jerk shad.
Yeah.
It's easy to work.
Yep.
All right, Jay, you got your.
Yeah, so mine, I think the dummy-proof bait is a spoon. I mean, it's hard to mess that up. It's literally just you. That's the bait that you can get away with. Literally, you cast it out, you reel it back. You cast it out, reel it back. And now, obviously, you can vary your presentation from there, but as far as just getting bites and catching fish, a cast out and steady retrieve will produce fish and will produce bites.
Okay, give the preferential depth for your particular choice. Each one of us.
So for the spoon, I would say 2 to 4 feet in that range.
Not 1 to 3.
I think 1 is a little shallow for a spoon. If you got a really light spoon, maybe like I know Johnson makes some maybe 1/8 ounce spoons that you could, but you're just having to reel it so fast in that depth of water because most of our areas got grass on the bottom of it, so it's going to get hung up in the grass in that. I like 2 to 4 depth, 2 to 4 feet, because I can pretty much cover the water column in that. I think 5. If you get over 5 and 7 feet, I think you're not going to be as efficient with that
I
bait. in
almost
that
never
depth.
catch a fish and I use a 1/2 ounce spoon in over 3 feet.
Yeah.
To me, it's 1.5 to 3.
Yeah,
But go ahead,
yeah.
Kenny. What for your keel weight? What depth?
Really, you can fish that any depth. Just you'd have to
But
adjust the
you
weight.
got to teach this guy to go catch a
So
fish. Now, give him something.
I would say if you target 2 to 4 feet, 2 to 4.5, pretty much with a 1/8 year round, you're going to catch fish.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give my cork. I'm going to step out to 3 to 5.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that it's not that you can't catch fish shallower than that, but you've got 2 other techniques here to use. So when you step out, pick up your cork and put a manageable leader length on there. I would say 3 or less, and learn to catch fish with it, and then play with lengths when you get a little better at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only reason I didn't say spoon is because I knew.
Yeah.
I knew
Well,
if
you were going to
spoon.
say spoon, I think I would have probably said something like a popper or something like that. Some kind of really easy top water plug that you could throw. That would be, that's going to trigger bites too.
So that's good lures, good baits.
Yeah.
What about their new fishermen for their gear?
I think just a regular 2,500 to 3,000 size spool, depending on who makes it. Everybody makes a reel pretty much in that size.
Yep.
Something that's going to hold. It usually holds 150 to 180 yards of line, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
And then at least a 7-foot medium action rod, I think would be a great. I don't go. The number one mistake I see saltwater anglers who are new to saltwater angling, they go out and they get that big surf rod that's got the 5,000 or 6,000 size spool reel on there with a big 7.5, 8 foot and they're out there
And 25 to 30 pound test.
Right,
Where
right.
they can't cast anything
right, exactly,
over 35
exactly,
feet.
yeah.
So I'm the same. I would recommend a 2,500 to 3,000 size reel. I would recommend a 7'6" rod just for the casting. Until you get that technique down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from my rig, I'm gonna change the game. I'm gonna say a 4,000 because with the larger spool, they're gonna make a longer cast easier. So until they learn to cast, once they learn to cast, they can back down to a smaller diameter spool. And I'm throwing mono, and I'm assuming they are rather than braid because they're beginners.
Yeah.
As they graduate to braid, drop back down to a 30.
Yeah, and you make a good point there. That's probably not a bad idea to start. If you're new to saltwater fishing or fishing in general, to throw monofilament.
I think you start with monofilament.
Yeah.
I started with monofilament.
Just because the knot tendency, you have to really mind your line. If you're fishing
We're
with
out there to
braid.
have fun, not play with, not
pick knots, out of your line.
Yeah, I tell it. Well, of course, they didn't have braid when I was a kid, but I tell everyone I'm a professional knot tire.
That's pretty much it, man. Yeah. Not untangler, professional knot untangler.
Evan, yeah. I'm not that. I cut them. I have no patience for wind knots. I just cut them. They sell more line at the store every day.
Yeah.
So Evan said with the size of fish that Pat catches, he needs a 4,000.
Oh, yeah, he's blowing smoke, folks. This is a smoke blower.
All right, so that's going to kind of wrap up our tackle tip. So we're going to move on to the Q&A section of the show this evening.
Wait, I got a hot topic to cover.
Yeah, let's get to that. No. I'm just going to talk about questions, give people an opportunity to get them in while we do the hot topic. We're gonna touch on our hot topics segment here in just a second, but before we do that, if you guys have any questions that you want to get in, George, I know you had a couple things that you wanted to mention. If you want to just post a question on there, we can get to that in a minute. And that'll remind me to cover it too, George. So if you want to throw that in the chat about some of the stuff that you messaged me about, feel free to do that. And anybody else who's in or watching, please, if you have any questions. We do our best to try to answer those to the best of our ability without, we are guides for a living, so we can't give away everything, but we'll try to give you as much as we can. And so get those questions in, bring them in. It's September. If you're going to be on the water or you got something coming up, please feel free to get those in. I've got some questions that I'm going to cover. Here in a minute too that people sent in earlier in the week, so we'll touch on those. But if you have any questions, please get those in. And we're going to touch on the hot topic, and then we'll get to those questions. So, Kenny, what was the hot topic that you wanted to do?
The new redfish regulations that went into effect
today.
You got,
that's right.
I've corrected a lot of people on Facebook lately. They're misinformed. They're not reading the laws. I had people telling me that you keep 2 redfish, that changed, and it never changed. That was just a proposal. So now, starting today, it's 1 redfish per person, like it always has been, a max of 4 per vessel, and the guide and crew does not count.
Yeah.
And the old vessel limit was 6. So if you've been fishing with 5 friends, which I guess some of y'all do, you can't all have a redfish, is what Kenny's saying. It's not 1 per person. It's 4 on the boat, or 1 per person, whichever is less.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't write it that way, but they used to, and that's the way to write it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not much is changing other than the vessel limit.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and a lot
And then the guy, the
And
captain.
we're ghosts now.
Yeah, we're ghosts. We
complete
don't-
ghosts.
we don't exist
even
on the
exist.
boat.
We're not
Right.
even on the boat.
Right.
We can't have a trout. We can't have a red. Next, we won't be able to hold a rod.
and you know, I've spoke with a couple officers. They've written a lot of tickets on this. Another thing they're writing a lot of tickets on still, which it baffles me, it blows my mind, is more than 1 trout over 19 inches on the boat. You know, that's been in effect for how long now?
Oh yeah,
Since
I mean, as far as
January.
people
Since
still
January.
still breaking that rule, yeah.
That's the
Number
number one
one.
thing that they're writing tickets for is oversized trout, over the limit trout, and over the limit redfish, but trying to keep 2 a day.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bad law, and they should rescind it.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess
And if you don't know the laws, don't comment on
Yeah.
social media giving false
yeah,
information.
yeah,
police?
yeah.
You the police?
Man, I just don't want to see anyone get in trouble. You know,
Oh,
it's,
I understand. I'm just kidding.
oh yeah.
But yeah, it's very hard to imagine that you can only have 1 fish over 19 inches on the boat, especially after the rules have been extended from 24 inches to 20 inches, and they were always 1 per person. I've been here 32 years, and now we've got a rule that's different than the whole 32 years. And I mean, it's constructed differently.
Yeah.
This per vessel has never existed before on inshore rulings. And now we have, because they're so unimaginative, they've so absorbed an offshore bottom fishing rule and transferred it to inshore, just like the guide and crew. I've never seen a charter captain with a crew, and these imbeciles wrote captain and crew. It doesn't exist in shallow water. It doesn't exist in a boat unless you're going offshore. No one has a crew, so get over it.
I will say this though, me personally, I'm seeing, and maybe it's just in areas I'm fishing, but I'm seeing more big trout. I think it's
our fishery is as healthy as it's ever been.
right.
I mean, it's as good as
A lot of redfish.
as it's ever been. And I mean, obviously, Pat, you've been fishing here a lot longer than I have, but I've been fishing this coastline for 20 years, and it's in that 20 years, it's as good as it's as good now as I've seen it, over that whole time span. So,
Well, you're focusing more, but all of us are. We're focusing more on the large fish because we can't have them. And we didn't used to think about 19 and a half, 19 3/4. We didn't think about those fish. We didn't really even think about 20s. I didn't. I never really took a picture of somebody unless the fish was like 21 inches. And it was just a number with me. 20 it wasn't impressive. But a 21-inch trout was where I took, I called the trophy and I'd take the picture. But we were not going to have 1. Well, now the first fish over 19, we got the Kodak moment.
yeah.
So I am taking a picture because we're not going to get it. We're either not going to land, net, or hold the next one. So,
Yeah, it's like this week. I told you I caught a very large trout that was upper 20s, bumping 30.
that's
And,
nice.
and I never even put it on the board to measure it. Just I wanted to get it in the water, let it breed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have clients on the boat. It was me and a friend, and
Right.
he was like, I can't believe you didn't measure that. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd rather have
You've
more
seen
trout.
enough to know how big he was.
Oh yeah. Oh, he knew exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, this is a big fish. You need to measure that. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Nah, I'm good.
Well, I think, it's pretty special when you catch anything over 26, 27 inches. So, and it has seemed to be happening more often
It
recently,
is.
and I'm
It
seeing
is.
more pictures on social media of big fish as well. So
Typically, this
It's
time
good
of
to
year,
see.
you don't catch a lot of those.
a lot of those big,
and
those
we-
real big gator,
Right.
female trout for sure. So I mean, that's
But after
that's
cleaning
encouraging.
some and seeing some roe in them, I didn't even want to.
Sure.
Not big trout, but after cleaning some trout and there being some
Yeah.
roe in them lately, I want to keep her in the water and just let her go.
All right. So we got some questions starting to come in. So those guys who are getting those questions in, we're going to start getting to those now. So we appreciate that. I'm going to try to answer all of these. So if I skip one, please let me know. So let's start with.
There's one, where's everyone fish?
Yeah. So Aaron Hubbard asked, "Where's everyone fish?" I think that was more for the group chat, but I mean, we could talk about what the areas that we cover. I pretty much fish from Steenhatchee all the way to just west of the Osceola River. So anything that I talk about, that's the reference.
Narrowing it down for 'em.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't get too. We can't give away all the spots now, Pat. Come on now.
And what would you call that? Crow flies.
It's about 50 miles.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 50 miles of shoreline.
The entire coast of Taylor County. That's what he's talking about. It's actually 47.
Okay,
but who's picking?
Kenny's range is farther than mine. Kenny
It
goes
is,
farther
it
than I
is.
do. So.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of my trips and majority of my fishing is Keaton Beach. Steenhatchee. Let me say that Steenhatchee to basically the same area you are.
Yeah.
But I do fish a lot down in Swanee, venture down Cedar Key, Horseshoe, and Crystal River. I don't guide out of Crystal River, but I have guided plenty of times out of Cedar Key, Swanee. Swanee is one of my favorites.
Pat, you Keaton Beach only?
Yes.
Yeah.
Real simple.
Yep.
Basically from Fisherman's Rest to probably Finn Holloway.
Okay. That's a pretty good range. It's like,
It is.
what would that be? Probably 15 miles or so?
About
15,
16
16 miles, something like that?
Well, it's 17 from number 1 to Rock Island, and
Yeah.
Rock Island's 2 from
3, I think it's
Finn
3.
Holloway.
Yeah, it's 2 to 3 from.
Bank-wise
Yeah,
or
yeah.
shore-wise.
Yeah.
So, that range is 6, 7, 8 south and 16 north, 12 north, so about
I think
20 miles.
anyone that knows with me knows that my range out of Keaton is a long ways.
Yeah. I'll make some big runs, too. All right, so... all right, so here we go. Tim Moody says, do you think there are days when you catch more trout if you have the longest cast away from the boat?
Absolutely. Especially on larger fish, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously those fish haven't felt you yet. They're less aware of your presence that far away, the farther they are away from the boat. So those bigger fish are more aptly to bite because they're just kind of doing their thing.
That's
It's time is more than anything. A larger fish is slower. He has more time to get to you before the boat spooks him off of your presentation.
that brings another thing. That's why I downsize my line when we get in later into fall and winter. I'll go from 15 to 10 and get that more distance on these lighter baits.
And usually in the wintertime, you're not running into those really, really big fish as well. You can run into them
but
occasionally.
depending on
and
where
10
I'm
pounds
fishing,
is,
10 pounds is
10
plenty.
pounds is plenty. Right. Evan's in here answering all the questions. Evan, you should have just stayed on, man. You should have just stayed here if you want to answer all the questions.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We appreciate the
George Quinn asked, where did Evan catch that 40-inch red?
in the mouth, right in the mouth.
Yeah, I think Evan responded right there near the Keaton Pier. I can tell you, George, and I don't think Evan will mind me sharing this because it's pretty easily well known if you just look at the picture, but he did catch it on topwater plug. So I think you can
in the mouth.
Yeah, you can. But yeah, that was cool. That's a big fish for our area. I don't know that I've ever seen one 43 inches caught. I did
Caught two
that are close. I've caught some 40s, but 43. I don't know. I haven't. On my boat, we haven't caught one a 43.
We had a
yet.
double up this year right around that size.
Yeah,
I just ran up on a school in 7 feet of water, and
Yeah, there was some big fish out there. All right, let's keep going. Jason Johnson asks, talk a little bit about catching triple tail off crab traps, bait, how to, etc. Thanks.
Learn to cast.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to be accurate on that one for sure.
I disagree. I mean, you do have to be accurate to an extent, but my tactics, and I've done a fair share of triple tail fishing, cast away from it and just let it drift into it. You don't want to cast right on top of them. You don't want to spook them, especially if you're using a cork, which is the simplest for.
Well, you're touching on it, but really the best thing to use if you're trying to catch that triple tail is a shrimp under a cork.
Or cut bait.
Cut
bait works great.
Like that,
and typically, if you see them laying flat up on the buoy, You want a short, 10, 12-inch leader.
Yeah, it's got to be shallow. Yeah.
And just cast it. I always say about 10 feet away and just let it drift past that core.
Yeah, and you can throw past it and then
reel it in.
reel
but reel it in
in
slow.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't want to spook
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
They're pretty easy now. If you run by one and it goes down, I'm going to throw one with a longer leader because he's going to go straight down.
Yeah, stay on the line of the crab trap that he's on. Yep.
Yeah, and if you're fishing pilings or poles and those fish are on the bottom, a jig head.
Sure. And then I guess if you're fishing artificial, it seems like you want to swim that. That's where you do have to be accurate.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're fishing an artificial bait,
cast past it.
You cast past the fish and you reel that artificial on a steady retrieve right into his face. And sometimes if he doesn't bite it that way, if you reel it right into his face and then let it drop, you'll see him follow it down, and then all of a sudden you'll come tight.
And that's another thing. If you're using a cork and you're drifting it past.
Yeah, when you
don't stop it. Don't stop it when it gets just past it. Let it go. Sometimes you let it go 10, 15 feet, and they're on it. And most of them, I should say, most of the lower slots will kind of gradually take that cork under. Your bigger ones, I mean, they just inhale it. But that's something to think about. Let them take it. Let them take it like we talk about with trout. Let them take it. Set the hook.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Anything? I guess Pat. I guess you got anything to add to that? That cover it?
No.
Okay.
I don't. I defer to y'all's knowledge
All right.
on it. But if you don't know what you're doing, you cast and drag into the ropes.
You're done. Yeah. Well, you're done.
It's
with
a
that
pretty
fish.
frustrating day
Yeah.
in current.
If you do that, leave it on the rope. Pick up another rod.
Yeah. Don't go unhook it, because when you go to unhook that off the road, that fish is gone.
And if you want to learn, you can book a trip.
There you go.
We'll teach you.
Then next one, Davis Dodson says Texas eye or trout eye
Or
redfish eye.
Okay, so this is a good one. I like the Texas eye when I'm using the smaller Z-Man, like the 4-inch.
Why don't you first talk about the differences between the three?
Okay, so Texas eye is
Before you get
it's a jig head with a little eyelet on it with the hook attached to it, and it swivels around.
It's like a segmented.
Yes,
It's segmented. Yes,
that's the word.
Yes, it's segmented.
A trout eye has got a big eye, and it's a little shorter hook, kind of like your typical jig head. The redfish eye has a longer hook.
Longer shaft.
Yes. So the Texas eye I like, especially with those smaller 4-inch jerk shads with Z-Man.
It allows them their action to
really
quiver.
really
It does.
guard. Yeah,
It does.
Yeah, move side to side.
The trout eye I don't use a lot, but when I do use them, it's normally with like the shorter paddle tails.
Yep.
My favorite is the redfish eye, especially when rigging a fluke or a jerk shad.
Is that just because it gets further down the body?
Well, not just that. The action is a lot better.
I got you.
The head on it is a little bit wider, and it creates a more almost like walk the dog, more side to side action.
Sachet.
There you go.
We'll breaking out some dancing terms here. Yeah. So again, Evan's answering all these questions in the chat. So.
What did Evan say on that one?
He said, he just said, what's the situation? They all have their niche. And what's each niche? And then Evan says, right here in the group chat, he says, Texas eye is weedless for grassy situations or shallow. Trout eye is smaller, so smaller fish. Redfish eye bigger, so bigger fish. So there you go. Wow.
Yeah. I like the, this is something I touched on before, but maybe some of the people didn't hear it. I'll use the Texas eye a lot when I'm fishing a popping cork in deep water with live pinfish, and keeping it down.
Yeah.
And it has that.
Yeah.
It allows that pinfish to still move around quite a bit, and then you have that extra eye. Just I don't know if y'all anyone's researched that.
No, I actually haven't spent too much time.
I had Z-Man guy on the boat, and he told me that they actually, the guy that invented that eye was a fish ophthalmologist or optometrist and whatever.
A fish optometrist.
Fish
Interesting.
optometrist, and studied fish eyes, and then he made that
Interesting.
eye on that.
To be as realistic as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what do fish normally go to an ophthalmologist for?
Hey,
When they get nearsighted.
hey, I'll tell you what he said.
Did he say he was one?
No, he wasn't. So I'll tell you what he said also. He's in the business to catch fishermen.
Yeah.
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 There you go.
That's it.
He got you. He got you into believing he was an ophthalmologist. So
No, he wasn't. He said the guy that invented that.
Okay.
Was, a little decal.
All right.
Billy Roberts asked the question: high tide versus low tide techniques. What are we doing, Billy? Are we what's the deal? Are we trout fishing? Because depends on what I'm targeting. Changes, depending on what I'm doing versus high tide versus low tide.
I would say that the easiest answer, not knowing the situation, is high tide typically pushes your fish. Your fish are going to flow with the tide.
Right.
High tide will push in, low tide will push out.
Right. And then, if we're talking about redfish and trout to some extent, they're going to gravitate to the inner structure when the water's up, and they're going to gravitate toward the outer structure when the water's down.
Which would be pushing in and out.
Yeah, which is pushing in and out. So
that's the easiest way to.
Yeah, and depending on the time of year, what depth that is, if it's wintertime, it could be as shallow as a foot. Those fish will push up in there real shallow. Whereas if it's summertime, it might be, the low tide spots might be 3 feet of water.
Right.
Whereas let me rephrase that.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. The low tide spots, you might be in 3 feet of water, but when the water comes in, it might still be 3 or 4 feet of water, something along those lines. Billy, if you want to specify as far as certain conditions, if you're still, watching and listening, feel free to ask maybe about a specific low tide or high tide technique that we could touch on. Feel free to do that.
It's nice to see Uncle Evan on participating.
Yeah.
As much as
I know it. He's I appreciate his presence this evening. It's been nice. George Quinn. So he had a bunch of comments from Evan. What's the deal with Uncle Kenny?
I don't know. That's why I just called him
Uncle Evan. Okay. Yeah, Davis Dodson. What's each niche? Like we kind of talked about each of those jig head niches there for a second. George Quinn says, "I would like to know if you guys are catching snook, and if so, what, and y'all's thoughts on why we're catching them all of a sudden."
Okay, so
there are some snook around.
I'm not going to say I'm catching some.
There's some around.
But snook season did open.
It did open today, but I would like to say, even though snook season is open, if you keep a snook north of Horseshoe Beach, I would frown upon
I know we
that.
have viewers down around Cedar
Right,
Key.
sure, and they've got a lot healthier snook population down there than we've got up here. We've got a very sparse, albeit there are some around, but it is very sparse snook population.
But it's multiplying every year. It is.
And that was his question. He was asking, why? What are your thoughts on why we're catching more snook all of a sudden?
Because of global warming. Next question. Next question.
So
it's that simple.
I was speaking with someone earlier this year that they're from Crystal River area, Homosassa area, and they seen the amount of whitebait we had. And they said when they started getting the larger influx of whitebait is when the snook really started coming in. Because when I was growing up, it was kind of like one or two here and there with Homosassa. Now it's loaded, Homosassa, Crystal River area. It just keeps pushing further and further north. And I think, I know these fish are finding areas to winter, and I say that because some of them that I've caught early spring are
and there's no
near
way
some spring-fed creeks.
There's no way they could have traveled as far as they did to be where they're at.
So
for that time of year, yeah.
When we get fish pushing up here, and some will say red tide, which I'm sure they want to survive.
Some will say global warming.
Right. Some will say global warming. Some will say bait, but I think the important thing is that these fish,
they got to have a winter refuge,
right?
Which we have.
We have a lot of.
We have a lot of winter refuge.
But we've always had it, and we didn't have them. So you haven't made a distinction. Go ahead.
And I do, obviously
Red Tide.
the red
The
tide,
red tide's been down there since the 50s.
but not
hasn't been as
but
bad
not
as
as
it is
bad, not as bad,
But
not as bad.
a snook doesn't know where the red tide is and where it isn't.
No, but if they don't have bait, because red tide keeps killing off their bait, and they keep pushing north to
looking
find
for
the bait,
bait,
looking for bait.
They could
and-
move to new areas searching for.
I mean,
forage.
that's just one theory.
They'll go to food, obviously, but if there is no food down there, yeah, I understand
Yeah.
that they're going to. But
I mean, I think there's multiple factors. I mean, I think obviously we haven't had. Well, we had some pretty cold mornings this past winter. We had a couple of teens.
Oh yeah,
We had a couple of mornings in
There
the
was
teens.
some fish kills around. There was
I
snook kills around Horseshoe and Swanee and Cedar Key.
I was out one morning and it was in I think the upper 20s, and I found some trout that I guess they got stuck in a little shallow hole, and then the water temperature got cold enough that night, and they were there was about half a dozen of them floating in this one little area. So I know it was it's getting cold enough.
Well, they're catching snook in South Carolina.
Yeah,
So
I don't know.
For
I
some,
mean, they're just
for some
expanding
reason,
their
they're expanding.
habitat. I think too.
but if we have a cold winter, it'll kill every damn one of them.
Unless they're in a refuge,
Right.
right.
If they
Unless
get back
they're
in,
if they're in a refuge,
spring-fed creek and river,
Well,
and that's you go down to Swanee in the winter, you'll catch them way upriver, Fanning, even Dowling Park area. You
Yeah.
can catch them in the fresh
well,
water.
and two, I think we're getting them up here long enough now that we're starting to get some more mature
residential.
breeder-size fish that are going to start, reproducing and putting more fish in the ecosystem. Which obviously, the more fish they have, the better chances that some of those are going to survive.
one other thing is we've got a lot more pressure in shallow water than we had 10 years ago, let alone 5 years ago, let alone 10. And that pressure, they're discovering fish that otherwise they would not have encountered.
It could be that too. There's just more people fishing, right? So there's the more people that are on the water, the more better chances that somebody's going to run into one, the fish that we have in the area.
I mean, that's definitely a possibility, but I just feel like we're getting more and more every year. I'm
Yeah.
catching more and more every year.
But Kenny, on your bait situation, I've been here 33 years, and we don't have any bait compared to what we had 20 years ago. There's just no bait out there compared to 20 years ago. I used to name numbers. I have numbers in my
Yeah, I was just
systems.
saying what he said was that there was during that time when he was here, there was a lot of white bait out there.
Okay.
And
There's nothing wrong with saying fish go to bait and follow bait. Of course they do. But the distinction and the difference between 2022 and 2000 is there were no snook here in 2000. Why? There was more bait here, but there was not, and there was just as much red tide. The red tide has been going on south of Tampa.
I don't think
for
I grew up in the
15
Tampa
years.
Bay area, and I disagree. The red tide is worse than it's ever been. I mean,
But below there, it's been killing our white bait as they go through the gauntlet, and that's why we don't have as much white bait as we had in the 90s and the 2000s, because it's killing the mature adult breeders of the pogies, the pilchards, and the ballyhoo.
Yeah, I mean that's
Metric tons of them. Is what
It would be very curious. I wish that we had some.
I mean, none of us are biologists. We're just I
well,
was just throwing out
what would be
one
cool
person
is
thought.
if we could maybe start tagging some of these fish that are up here. So
And
you
the
can
thing
figure
too
out
is
if we're keeping a population.
If they started migrating north,
Yeah.
I mean, and they migrated a lot to, like I said, Homosassa, Crystal River, and that Waukesassa, Cedar Key, and those fish just keep populating. Well, they're just getting closer and closer to us, and all those just keep repopulating. That's why, if you followed the snook for years now, when they started catching them, they started catching them in Waukesassa, then into Cedar Key, then a few into Swanee. Now Swanee's got an influx. You're catching them in Horseshoe. You're catching more and more in Steinhatchee. Those fish are probably just populating and just slowly migrating.
maybe expanding their range every summer. They just kind of branch out a little farther from where they were, and then maybe find a winter refuge, closer instead of going all the way. I don't know. There's a lot of variables.
You can go down to Homosassa, Crystal River area, and at certain times of the year, and you can dang near walk across the schools. of snook.
in
They're
those
so
springs,
thick.
yeah, for sure.
So this is just my theory. I wonder if they're just getting so populated that they just some of them just keep moving.
Could be. It could be.
And it's just theory.
I think there's probably a lot of variables that come
Yeah,
into play for it. I think it's obviously not just one thing that you can put your finger on.
But we are
But-
we are definitely seeing more in
But
this area.
Evan says he actually feels like there are less snook in Taylor County than there were 3 years ago.
Kenny, what did you do last year in November, December, and January? Caught trout out on the flats, right?
I
Have
did.
you ever done that before? In those numbers?
No.
You don't attribute that to the temperature change?
The water was cold.
But it wasn't cold like it used to be cold, because they wouldn't bite when it was in January. We wouldn't even catch a fish unless we were in a creek or maybe an hour a day. We're getting, I agree with you that the reproduction is going to continue to expand the range of the fish as they survive. And with the numbers of fish and the less numbers of people fishing, because from Crystal to Horseshoe doesn't have anywhere near the pressure.
Right.
Is it that they do Tampa Bay?
Right,
or
right, yeah,
right.
exactly.
Crystal South. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So those fish are getting ollie in free card due to the fact that there's less pressure on those particular snook.
Yeah.
Those fish people are not geared up for them. They're not expecting them. They're not targeting them. And like I said, what you started to say, I was going to say, I would love to see the state say you couldn't keep one up here
Yeah.
until we get
Right.
Yeah.
till we
Yeah.
get
Till we
a
know.
fishery,
Yeah. Yeah.
until the fishery is established.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, have
Yeah.
a no keep, and you'd never hear that from me again, but have a no keep in our whole Big Bend
Right.
region.
Yep.
Our new region asks for that, and then maybe we'll have a fishery to sell when I'm not here.
Yeah.
Maybe y'all have a whole nother fishery.
Yeah, so I
See, I'm catching. I have caught more than did 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But it also may just be the areas I'm fishing.
sure, yeah. It's hard to say. Up until the past month or so, I would have said, we caught more a few years ago than this year, but there's been quite a few fish caught in the last.
I mean, I don't
month or
share
two.
it. I've shared one snook in the last few years, and that was when me and Evan went on a fishing trip
Yeah. together. Evan says I buy into the Irma theory, which is that we had a huge wall of water get pushed in here, or it got sucked out,
Irma theory.
or hurricane, where you remember when where it sucked all the water out and you can like walk out for
Yeah, it took my holding pin and
Yeah.
moved it a mile.
yeah, and there was no manatees got stuck and all it sucked all that water out. And then when the water came back in, the theory is that it brought some snook with it or something like that. But
Possible.
I mean, who knows? Let me see. There was a question up here that I was going to get back to. Guys, if you got any more questions, we're about to wrap it up. So if you get those questions in, please get those in. George says we need all kayak anglers to come support and fish the upcoming Florida Redfish Series kayak division. Yep, that's new this year. We talked about that last month, and just want a quick reminder on that there is a new kayak division in the Florida Redfish Series. So if you get a chance, you definitely want to try to
Not calling
get
you a
in on
liar,
that.
Evan. Just different observation.
There it was. Davis Dodson said, "Is there a law?" And I don't know the answer to this. Is there a law on fishing around oyster farms? Kenny, do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't. I know I fish around clam leases.
I think maybe that's what he's referring to, the clam leases. But I don't. I think you can fit as long as you don't mess them up.
Yeah, you can fish around them.
Yeah, you don't. You can fish around them.
You do have to be. Evan said you have to be accurate to drift a court by a buoy. You do, but what I mean is you don't have to hit it on a dime. You can cast past it far right of it, and you can reel it and manipulate that by reeling up or so.
Yeah. Yeah, so Evan was talking about I'll just read this real quick. He says I believe they were redispersed on the Gulf Coast due to the mega low tide caused by Hurricane Irma, and since then they have been gradually dying off due to the cold. Some have survived. I guess that's possible.
Well, I wish it had brought us some bonefish and some.
Actually, bonefish
And,
have moved north. They've been catching them in Tarpon Springs.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I would hope that the whole state gets ingested with. I mean, I hope we can get all the species.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
I'd like to be able to catch mango snapper off the dock.
That would be great.
Wouldn't that be great?
Here's kind of an interesting question from Tim Moody. George, if we get a snook tagging program, yeah, we'll definitely let you know if there's something going on with that, which I would love to do that. That would be really cool. Tim Moody says, if the trout are in 3 foot at high tide in 2 weeks, how far out do they go during low tide? And why the 2 weeks there, Tim? What's so special about 2 weeks?
He's going to be fishing in 2 weeks.
I guess so.
It all depends.
Yeah, there's a lot can change, A lot can change in 2 weeks. If they're in 3 foot at high tide, I mean.
Can I take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Pat. Absolutely.
You're taking it a little too literal. Our depth is always the same. There's a proverb I use called a Chinese proverb that's actually what I found out recently is Greek, but it says man can never step in the same river. Okay, what that means is the water's moving. You're never in the same place, and those trout don't surf in and out necessarily, and they don't necessarily sit on the couch, but you're moving through the water where the feed is happening. And what you need to identify on your boat on any given drift is what time of the tide did I have a bite and what depth, and then you'll be you'll have a repeatability that will be a functioning format for you. But if you try to go to 3 feet of water, it means nothing because it might be a mile offshore, and then you can move a mile up the coast, and it might be 100 feet offshore. So 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet is just a guide we use when we write reports or talk reports to say this is the region that you need to be covering.
Started.
Right, yeah.
And once you cover it, then you make your discovery of the bite.
Yeah, definitely. That's just kind of the general, okay, get started here. That doesn't mean you're going to catch fish right there. You might have to expand in or out from there to see where the fish are holding from one
And I would say, more so in the winter and late January, early February, you can pinpoint that a little better and get in between where they are at low tide, where they want to be at high tide, and you can have a steady flow of fish coming through. But this time of year, it's a little different.
Yeah. All right. I think that's going to about wrap us up. Todd Tanner said, just last little comment here. Todd, we're not going to get too much into this, but to add fuel to the fire after being down there during scallop season, a lot of folks need a class on boating etiquette. That is absolutely true. Scallop season is the worst. Boating etiquette during scallop season.
I didn't know there was any boating etiquette at Keaton Beach.
Yeah. That's a very good way to put that, Pat. And so on that note, we will wrap up. We hope you guys have enjoyed this evening. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you have any questions after we sign off, please feel free to post those in the chat. Kenny and I check on it, as those questions come in, and we are more than happy to respond to anything that comes up. Pat, appreciate you coming in and hanging out with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I
appreciate.
And we want to thank Stephanie and George for being our title sponsor this month.
Absolutely, we appreciate the Fish Gills property.
This is a beautiful house. If you've never been here,
magnificent.
You need to rent this house.
Yep, it sleeps 3. It's got. It's a 3-3, so it sleeps 7 to 10. It's a 1, and there's a 1-to-1 efficiency underneath it that'll sleep 2 to 4. So it's a big place. It's got boat slips, and they've got several options for you here in Keaton Beach, Florida. So if you are interested in renting a house, Stephanie, phone number I can give them. 772-284-0124. If you give Stephanie a call, she will tell you what they have available. And these they're top notch. So I would highly encourage you to give one of these places a chance and stay right here in Keaton Beach. Come experience, in my opinion, the best fishing in the state of Florida.
I have to agree.
So you can go to a lot of places, but obviously we don't have some of the species that other parts of Florida have. But as far as just sheer quality of fishing, I don't know that you will find it a better place in regards to the big Bend.
I just got back
Florida
from the Keys, fishing in the Keys, and I couldn't wait to get back.
It's hard to leave. George says really enjoyed Pat, so there you go, Pat. And then also Wes Griffin says bring Pat back in October. Well, we might just have to do that. So,
thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, guys, we are going to sign off. Once again, I am Captain Jay Carson. This is Captain Kenny Mullins. And again, thank you, Captain Pat McGriff, for coming on. Until next month, we'll see you then.